Welcome to my channel, where every star tells its own tale across the galaxy. Ever wondered what happens when the galaxy's most peaceful council meets Earth's deadliest charm? Let's get into the story.
Ambassador Krelfani had seen many things in his 40 years of diplomatic service across the Galactic Federation. He had witnessed the birth of new civilizations, the fall of ancient empires, and the delicate dance of interstellar politics that kept hundreds of species from each other's throats. But he had never seen anything quite like this. The human delegation sat across from him in the pristine conference room aboard Federation Station Alpha 7. Their expressions carefully neutral as they presented their application for military partnership. The humans had been in space for barely 3 decades, yet they had already established colonies on 17 worlds and built a respectable fleet of exploration vessels. "Your technological development is impressive," Krelfani admitted, his 4 eyes scanning the datapad before him. "However, the Federation has strict protocols regarding military cooperation. We need to understand your combat capabilities before we can approve joint operations." Captain Maria Santos, the lead human representative, nodded. "Of course, Ambassador. We've prepared a demonstration of our primary fighter craft." "Excellent. What do you call this vessel?" "The Galactic Destroyer."
The silence that followed was deafening. Krelthani's translator implant clicked several times as if struggling to process the audacious name. Around the table, representatives from a dozen different species exchanged glances of disbelief. "I'm sorry," said Commander Vextar of the Regelian Defense Corps, his scaled features twisting into what might have been amusement. "Did you just say Galactic Destroyer?" Captain Santos smiled. "That's correct. But it's a single-pilot fighter craft," stammered Lieutenant Zaraquin of the Andromedan Fleet. "I've seen the specifications. It's 17 meters long and masses barely 40 tons. How can you possibly call such a small vessel a galactic destroyer?" The humans exchanged looks among themselves, and Krelthani noticed something pass between them, a shared understanding that made him suddenly uncomfortable. "Perhaps," Captain Santos said carefully, "it would be better if we showed you." 3 hours later, the assembled Federation fleet hung in space near the Kepler 442 system, watching as a lone human fighter approached the designated target zone. The Galactic Destroyer was indeed small, a sleek, angular craft that looked almost fragile compared to the massive Federation battleships surrounding it. "Target acquired," came the pilot's voice over the comm. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jackson Hayes, beginning demonstration run." The target was a derelict space station, roughly the size of a small moon, that had been abandoned by the Centauri Republic decades ago. It was perfect for weapons testing, large enough to showcase firepower, but with no strategic value. "Weapons hot," Hayes reported. "Engaging target." Krelthani watched through the observation deck's massive viewports as the tiny fighter approached the station. He expected to see conventional weapons, plasma cannons perhaps, or particle beams. What he saw instead made his blood freeze. The fighter fired a single projectile. It was barely visible, a dark speck that seemed to move far too slowly for a weapon. But as it struck the station, something impossible happened. The entire structure simply stopped. For a moment, nothing seemed to change. The station hung in space exactly as it had before. Then, slowly, catastrophically, it began to collapse in on itself. "What?" Vextar began, but his words died as the station's metal hull started to crumple like paper. Massive structural beams that had withstood meteors and cosmic radiation for decades bent and twisted as if they were made of clay.
Gravitational anomaly detected.
The Federation flagship's tactical officer reported, his voice tight with shock. Massive gravitational field forming at the impact site. The collapse accelerated. Within minutes, the entire station, millions of tons of metal, composite materials, and abandoned equipment had compressed into a sphere barely 100 meters across. The gravitational field was so intense that it began pulling in debris from nearby asteroids. "Artificial black hole," whispered Dr. Yolanra, the Federation's chief astrophysicist. "They've created an artificial black hole." As if responding to her words, the compressed matter reached critical density. The sphere flashed once brilliantly and then disappeared entirely, taking with it several nearby asteroids that had been caught in its gravitational pull. The comm channel crackled to life. "Target neutralized," Lieutenant Commander Hayes reported calmly, returning to base. The observation deck was silent except for the hum of life support systems. Kralfani stared at the empty space where the station had been, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. "How?" he finally managed. Captain Santos had been watching the demonstration with the same casual interest one might show while observing a routine training exercise. "Controlled singularity warhead. We compress a small amount of exotic matter using a localized space-time distortion field. Upon impact, the matter undergoes rapid gravitational collapse, creating a temporary black hole." "Temporary?" Vextar's voice was barely a whisper. "Usually lasts about 3 minutes before it evaporates via Hawking radiation, long enough to destroy pretty much anything within a few hundred kilometers." Dr. Yolanra stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her shock. "The energy requirements alone should be impossible. How do you power such a weapon?" "Quantum vacuum extraction. We tap into the zero-point energy field. Took us about 15 years to figure out how to do it safely." "Safely?" Kralfani's voice cracked slightly. "Well, we only lost 3 solar systems during the testing phase." The assembled Federation representatives stared at her in horror. "You destroyed 3 solar systems?" Commander Vextar demanded. "Accidentally," Captain Santos clarified. "The early prototypes were a bit, unpredictable, but we've worked out the bugs now. The current generation of galactic destroyers has a 0% chance of causing uncontrolled gravitational collapse." 0%? Dr. Yolandra asked weakly. "Well, 0.003%, but that's within acceptable parameters." Kralfani felt his legs give out and sank into the nearest chair. "You named a fighter craft capable of destroying solar systems the Galactic Destroyer."
It seemed appropriate, Captain Santos said with a shrug, though the original name was actually the Cosmic Annihilator, but the marketing department thought that sounded too aggressive. "Too aggressive?" Vectar repeated faintly. "For a fighter craft, yes. We reserve names like that for our capital ships." The Federation representatives exchanged glances of pure terror. "What," Kralfani asked very slowly, "do you call your capital ships?" Captain Santos smiled, and for the first time, Kralfani saw something genuinely frightening in that expression. "Well, our newest dreadnought class is called the Universe Ender. We've only built one so far, but the test results were promising." "Promising how?" Dr. Yelnara whispered. "It successfully destroyed a small galaxy in the Magellanic Cluster. Took about 6 hours. Very efficient." The observation deck fell silent, except for the sound of several Federation officers fainting. Of course, we continued conversationally. "That was just a proof of concept. The production models will be much more powerful. We're aiming to reduce the galaxy destruction time to under 2 hours. Kralfani stared at the human captain, his mind reeling. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because we want to be friends," Captain Santos replied with disturbing sincerity. "The Federation has a reputation for being peaceful and cooperative. We respect that. We want to be part of that." "And if we refuse your application for military partnership?" Captain Santos's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Well, we'd be disappointed, of course, but we're sure you'll make the right decision." Through the viewport, Kralfani could see the human fighter returning to its carrier.
Such a small craft, so innocuous-looking, yet capable of destroying entire star systems. "How many of these galactic destroyers do you have?" he asked. "Currently about 12,000, but we're ramping up production. Our goal is to have 50,000 operational within the next 5 years." Krelfani's throat went dry. 50,000? "One for every Federation member world," Captain Santos explained helpfully, "just in case." The implications hit him like a physical blow. The humans weren't just asking to join the Federation's military alliance, they were making it clear that refusal wasn't really an option. I need to consult with the Federation Council," he stammered. "Of course, take all the time you need." Captain Santos stood and gathered her materials. "We'll be in orbit around Earth if you need us. Oh, and Ambassador?" "Yes?" "When you're discussing this with the Council, you might want to mention that we've detected some unusual activity in the Andromeda Galaxy. Our long-range sensors picked up what appears to be a massive fleet heading our direction. They should arrive in about 18 months. Krelfani felt the blood drain from his face. Andromeda? But that's the Devourers, the ancient enemy. They were supposed to be extinct. "Apparently not," Captain Santos said cheerfully. "But don't worry. We've been preparing for this possibility ever since we learned about them from your historical databases." "Preparing how?" Captain Santos paused at the door, her smile becoming something that would haunt Krelfani's dreams for years to come. "Let's just say that when the Devourers arrive, they're going to learn why we chose to name our species' greatest achievement the Galactic Destroyer. And more importantly, they're going to learn why we built 50,000 of them."
As the door closed behind the human delegation, Krelfani stared out at the stars, wondering if the Federation had just gained the most powerful ally in galactic history, or if they had just met their future conquerors. In the distance, the small human fighter continued its patrol, looking harmless and insignificant against the vast backdrop of space. But Krelfani would never see it that way again. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council had been in progress for 18 hours. Ambassador Krelfani stood before the assembled representatives of 847 species, his report having reduced the vast chamber to stunned silence. "Let me understand this correctly," said High Chancellor Mordock, her ancient voice carrying across the amphitheater. "The humans have created what they casually call fighter craft that can destroy entire star systems?" "That is correct, High Chancellor. And they have 12,000 of these galactic destroyers, with plans to build 50,000 more." A ripple of nervous chittering, clicking, and harmonized frequencies swept through the assembled delegates. Representative Quindar of the Crystalline Collective raised a shimmering appendage. "What of their capital ships? You mentioned something called the Universe Ender." Krelfani's throat sacs deflated with dread. "According to Captain Santos, it successfully destroyed a small galaxy in 6 hours. They're working to improve efficiency." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates leapt from their seats, emergency translators overloaded with simultaneous panic in hundreds of languages, and 3 representatives from aquatic species had to be restrained from flooding their environment suits in terror. "Order!" High Chancellor Mordock's voice boomed through the chamber's acoustic amplifiers. "We must think rationally about this situation." Senator Velkris of the Andromedan Coalition stood, his bioluminescent patches flashing in agitation. "Rationally? They've built weapons that make our entire combined fleet look like children's toys. How do we respond rationally to that?" "We could try to appease them," suggested Ambassador Thisera from the Serpentine Republic. "Give them what they want. Full military partnership, maybe even a seat on the High Council." "And when they decide they want more," interrupted General Zarthok of the Warrior Caste,
when they decide the Federation itself is an obstacle to their expansion? You're assuming hostile intent, said Dr. Nexian, the Federation's chief xenopsychologist. Perhaps they truly do want peaceful cooperation. Peaceful cooperation? General Zarthok's armor plates rattled with indignation. They told us they accidentally destroyed 3 solar systems during testing. Accidentally? High Chancellor Mordock called for silence again. We need more information. Has anyone attempted to verify these claims? Krelthani activated his datapad. I took the liberty of dispatching a long-range reconnaissance probe to one of the systems the humans mentioned losing during their testing phase, the Kepler-186 system. The chamber's main display activated, showing sensor readings from the probe. Where 5 planets and a star should have been, there was nothing but empty space and a fading gravitational anomaly. The entire system is gone, Krelthani reported quietly. Not destroyed, gone, as if it never existed. The silence that followed was deafening. There's more, Krelthani continued reluctantly. Our deep space monitoring stations have confirmed the approach of a massive fleet from the Andromeda galaxy. The humans were correct about the Devourers returning. How massive? High Chancellor Mordock asked. Conservative estimates suggest over 1 million ships, possibly more. The chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. The Devourers had nearly destroyed the galaxy the last time they appeared 3 million years ago. It had taken the combined might of 100 civilizations to drive them back, and most of those civilizations had been extinct for millennia. The Federation's current combined fleet consists of approximately 50,000 vessels, General Zarthok said grimly. Against 1 million Devourers? We'd be slaughtered, Senator Velkris finished.
Representative Zephyr of the Energy Collective spoke for the first time, her voice a harmony of electromagnetic frequencies. What if the humans are telling the truth? What if their weapons actually work as advertised? Then 50,000 human fighters might be enough to stop the Devourers, Dr. Nexian said slowly. Or, General Zarthok countered, we might be trading one destroyer for another. What happens after the humans defeat the Devourers? What happens to the rest of us? Before anyone could answer, the chamber's communication array activated. A familiar voice filled the space. Greetings, honorable members of the Galactic Federation Council. This is Captain Santos. Every eye in the chamber turned to the source of the transmission. On the main display, Captain Santos appeared, but she was no longer in the sterile conference room of Federation Station Alpha 7. She stood on what appeared to be the bridge of a massive warship. I hope you don't mind the interruption, she continued pleasantly, but we detected some unusual energy signatures in your sector and wanted to make sure everything was all right. High Chancellor Mordock leaned forward. Captain Santos, how are you accessing our secure communication network? Oh, your encryption is quite sophisticated. It took our AI about 30 seconds to crack it. But don't worry, we're not listening to anything classified. We just wanted to let you know that we've been monitoring the Devourer fleet's approach. The display shifted to a 3-dimensional tactical map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated the approaching Devourer fleet, while blue markers showed human positions. As you can see, Captain Santos explained, we've been repositioning our forces to intercept them before they reach Federation space. It seemed like the neighborly thing to do. Ambassador Thisar spoke up nervously. Captain, how many ships do you have in position? For this operation? About 300,000. The number hit the chamber like a physical blow. 300,000 ships, 6 times the size of the entire Federation fleet. I thought you only had exploration vessels and fighters, Krelthani managed. Well, we've been busy since our last meeting. The approaching threat required us to accelerate our construction schedule. Plus, we received some interesting data about Devourer technology from your historical archives. You accessed our historical archives? High Chancellor Mordock's voice carried a dangerous edge. Only the non-classified sections, of course, though I have to say, your security really could use some work. Anyway, the data was very helpful.
we've made some improvements to our weapons systems." The tactical display zoomed in on the human fleet positions. Instead of the small fighters they had expected, the display showed vessels that dwarfed anything in Federation service. "Are those—" Dr. Nexuin began. "Universe Enders, yes, Mark II models. We managed to reduce the galaxy destruction time to 90 minutes. Though honestly, we're hoping we won't need to use them at full power." Senator Velcris stood shakily. "How many of those ships do you have?" "Currently operational, about 50. But we have another 200 in various stages of construction. Should be ready in about 6 months, assuming we don't need them sooner." The chamber erupted in pandemonium. Delegates screamed, fainted, or simply stared in shock at the display showing human warships that could destroy galaxies.
If you enjoyed this narration and story, drop a voice in the comments to let our HFY team know. And remember, stay healthy, my humans. HFY signing out.